for most people, actually, because of the lack of intentionality of saving and investing for their future, I submit to you that actually some people will not be able to generate that much money per
Mm,
year from their pension products or savings products
mm,
or other any other asset income purely because they haven't prioritized it. And actually, that's why the state pension then becomes their main source
mm.
of income during retirement. And that's
Hello and welcome to the Woke Finance Podcast, the podcast discussing all things finance and all things finance related. It's your boy Peter, and I'm with my bro, my co-host Jax. How are you today?
yes, yes, Peter. I'm doing well. I don't know about you, but I've realized that it's starting to get a bit darker, a bit earlier here
Mm,
in the UK. And this morning it was quite chilly. So I think we are probably going towards the end of summer, which is quite annoying. I have really enjoyed my summer. But again, hey, look, winter, I call it the lock-in season, or autumn or winter, we call it the lock-in season. So it's time to get locked in.
listen, man. It's as you said, time to get locked in. I wonder what the weather is like in areas where we're getting listeners from. And Jax, this area that we're getting some new listeners from is called Alpharetta, which is a city in Georgia, US.
Oh, fantastic. We have a lot of listeners from the US. Probably say just under half our listeners are from the US, so that's fantastic. Welcome to the Woke Finance Podcast. You are here with myself, Jax, and the co-host Peter. And on this podcast, we talk about all things finance and all things finance related. But if you want to know more about what we do, because we do more than just podcasts, we do serve in the community, head over to www.wokefinance.co.uk. That is www.wokefinance.co.uk. And you can engage with us on social media as well. We are on your various different platforms. That's TikTok, that's LinkedIn, and also on Instagram. If you search for Woke Finance, you will be sure to find us. Welcome to the podcast. I hope you are enjoying and gaining tons of value.
Come on, a massive shout out to our listeners over there in Georgia, US, and all over the world. We see you, we appreciate you. Now, Jax, today's topic, we are going to be speaking about all things finance, well, finance related, but all things retirement planning. And this is a topic where sometimes you might be speaking to people and they might respond to this topic and say, I'll get onto that when I'm a bit older. Right now, I'm just, in my 20s, I'm a teen, or I'm in my 30s and 40s. I'm just kind of get around life and just manage my family and stuff like that. So I'll think about that a bit later on, Jax. But I guess, yeah, we're gonna be touching on this topic. But why is this, because I know this is actually on your heart, and we talk about, retirement. We talk about pensions a lot, actually, but retirement in general, Jax. I guess why is this on your heart right now in this season?
Yeah, fantastic. So, I was speaking to a couple young lads just the week gone. If they permit me to say their names are David and Josh. David, I know, is a listener of the Woke Finance podcast, and I was talking to them about, just general personal finance ideologies, etc., and the power of compounding. And I think what really came into my mind was they are so young compared to me, who's in my mid-30s now, right? But one of the things that most people regret, when it comes to finance and investing, etc., is not starting earlier. But it also reminded me of one of the topical issues, the difficulties that's taken place in society today, which is the inability for many people to retire and particularly to retire comfortably. And so, yeah, that's where the thought came, thinking about starting to think about retirement, not when we are in our 40s, 50s and approaching retirement, but actually from a very young age, which it could be in your 20s.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think we done an episode, and I'll dig it out at some point, but we've done an episode where we shared some stats on about the retirement crisis that we've been facing in the UK and where it's heading in the future. And it was some encouragement about how to avoid falling into the whole so-called pension crisis. But Jackson, I mean, yeah, it is crazy to think about, how many people when they reach retirement, they have to now struggle. They've worked pretty much all their adult lives, and then all of a sudden they reach retirement and they are struggling. And it's sad to think about that. But Jats, I guess, for young people, and not just young people, people in general, whatever age they are, why is it that, perhaps some people don't think too much about retirement until they think it's, and I quote this, it's time. But yeah, why why don't people think or get ready or start really effectively planning for retirement?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. I think there is a whole wide range of different reasons. And I think probably the thing about retirement, when people hear retirement, the first thing that comes to their mind is pensions. And I think when we heard the word pension, especially when I heard pensions before I became a financial professional, it sounds very boring. And I don't think the industry has done the best in marketing pension plans. When you look at pension products and stuff like that, or retirement products, what you see is often images of very old people, which is not very attractive to young people in their 20s, etc. So I think when you combine the fact that the idea of pensions just sounds old and boring and very hard to also understand, which is the second one, pensions and retirement planning can be a very complex area. It's not as
Mm,
simple as oh, just invest in assets or anything like that. It's extremely complex. We talk from, state pensions to private pensions, and many people don't even know the difference. Many people don't understand even the differences between a defined contribution plan and a defined benefit plan. So and by the way, Peter, there's been so much change when it comes to pensions
mm,
over the past 100 years that it's actually hard for even professionals to keep up.
mm.
So I do understand that because the whole idea of pensions and which then feeds into retirement planning has been such a complex, confusing area that many people just don't want to engage because they can't. They don't understand it well enough. And of
Yeah.
yeah.
And I was gonna say that it can be quite disheartening, Jax, because let's say you're 25, for example, and this area of retirement or pension, so to speak, want to be a bit more specific, it changes so often. So it's very easy to think by the time I'm 50, whatever I know of pensions now will be irrelevant in 20 years' time because everything is changing all the time. So it can be a bit disheartening in that area.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, this is true. You know, before we had final salary schemes, also known as defined benefit, there in itself shows the complexity of these schemes. Why do they have two different names for the same
Mm,
thing, right? And then you've got money purchase schemes and different contribution schemes. Again, the same thing, but two different names. So it can be very complex. And I think many people also struggle when it becomes overwhelming. The retirement planning is never just about pensions. We've got all different aspects of retirement planning, which is ultimately thinking about things like long-term care or what we want to do in retirement. Do we even want to retire here in the UK? And I think when it comes to that, trying to think about retirement, thinking about all the different aspects can become overwhelming, but also probably even more difficult nowadays as we've gone through a cost of living crisis, is that many people struggle to balance, spending today and saving for the future.
mm,
So we know that people struggle with instant gratification and actually struggle to delay gratification. That's just a standard practice that many people struggle with. But it gets even harder when you actually have a limited amount of resource available to
mm,
you.
mm,
So when it comes to choosing between saving for tomorrow or investing today, or sorry, spending today, the choice is quite simple for a lot of people. It's they would rather, spend today because that's all they have. And
mm.
they probably don't have much left over to invest in their future. So when you combine all these things together, the whole idea of retirement planning and pension planning is way too difficult, way too complex. And for many people, they believe that actually it's very difficult to decide to save for tomorrow when the resources are very limited. And if they do, would they actually be rewarded for it?
Mm. I mean, and that is the sad reality. Many of us here, not just in the UK, but all over, this is something that's just common in many parts of the world. Just don't have don't have enough to be able to prioritize saving for the future when they really strip things back. And Jax, I guess you also hear about things like, I mean, I've heard this so many times over the last, I'll say even 15 years. Um, yeah, your pensions aren't even saved by the time you do retire, like they're just gonna take your money anyway.
Well, I think that
That's not how they
statement.
sound, by the way. That was just my interpretation of it.
That's how you hear it. So that ideology often speaks to the lack of understanding, knowledge, about pensions, because what many people are referring to when they say that is the state pension, which is one very specific form and type of pension product which comes from the welfare system, which comes from the state. And there's many people that do believe that actually in the future the state pension probably won't exist anymore. Um, and they're not completely incorrect to think that way, but it's important to understand that that's very much different to pension products that are from your workplace or from your private kind of savings. Those are two completely different pensions. And also the next thing is it is true that with state pensions, even though they may not get rid of it completely, and this is my opinion, that actually they will probably still be around. However, maybe the age to which you can access it and how you access it in terms of how much you get, that may change as well. So I think it is true that yeah, it's something we have to be mindful of, but it also does speak to the lack of education when it comes to understanding pension products holistically.
And I guess for our listeners that don't know, that may are still learning more about pensions in particular, which is just an aspect of retirement, by the way.
Yeah.
Jax, I mean, just to make it very clear, with that state pension, like right now, that right now I think that pays about, I don't know, 12 grand a year. It's probably a little less than that. But when we're talking about pensions outside of state pension, we're talking about, as you said, things that you've been contributing, whether it's for your workplace, whether you have a private pension, which we envision being significantly more than 10 grand a year.
Well, that's a great question to ask actually, or thought process, because for most people, actually, because of the lack of intentionality of saving and investing for their future, I submit to you that actually some people will not be able to generate that much money per
Mm,
year from their pension products or savings products
mm,
or any other asset income, purely because they haven't prioritized it. And actually, that's why the state pension then becomes their main source
mm.
of income during retirement. And yeah, that's a problem.
It's a huge problem. And it's, yeah, just sad to think of as well, man. As I said, when we're all working hard all these years and then, at the end we end up just mainly relying and living on state pensions, which is not guaranteed, as we know. But no, I mean, for our listeners, if we was to like just ask them to stop now and think about this next question that I'm gonna ask you, and really ponder it, because I think if there's anything that our listeners are gonna take away from this particular episode is this next bit, just how. So my question to you is, why should everyone be taking this topic in terms of retirement planning as a whole? And we're not just talking about pensions, we're talking about, as you said, you know, how you're going to live, yeah, where you're going to live, what's your assets going to look like by the time you retire, etc. How you potentially going to provide for your future generations if that's something on your heart as well. But Jax, why should people be taking this extremely serious, regardless of where they are now in life? But why do we really need to be taking this extremely serious?
Yeah, I mean, how long do you have?
Mm,
I could spend a whole hour episode just talking about why taking retirement planning, seriously is extremely important. You're just speaking about state pensions, and I've got a statistic here that says, for most people who even get access to the full state pension, because guess what? That's not guaranteed. Here in the UK, you need to work for about 35 years
mm,
and contribute national insurance before you can actually get the full state pension, which is a 12 grand or so that you mentioned, Peter, right? But even at 12 grand for the average person only makes up about 30% of the total amount that they actually need
mm,
in order to live a comfortable life in retirement,
mm,
right? So you still need to find an extra 70%, and I'm not going to do the maths, which actually I could do the maths, probably about 65 grand to, is that right? Yeah. Okay, let me not try to do the math there. But you probably
mm,
you probably need an additional 70% somewhere else in order
mm.
to really live a comfortable retirement. So definitely not what I just said before, but 70% is really high. So why should people take retirement planning extremely seriously? Well, we have to look at the demographics and the way things are changing. And as I said, look, I could spend a whole episode talking about this, but one of the things we have to remember is that we are living longer, and that is extremely important to understand. The mere fact that we are living longer means that we are going to be retired for longer. And what does that mean? That means we have longevity. It means that we need to find a way to produce an income for a much longer period of time. Whatever nest egg or whatever amount of capital we've been able to amass over our working life, that needs to work hard for longer. And so that creates an additional problem that we need to solve, which is how do we look after ourselves in retirement, not relying on active income or not relying on our occupation to serve an income for us, but actually relying on our asset base in order to look after us for a much longer period of time. I believe I read somewhere that by 2039, the average life expectancy of women and men will be 91 and 89 respectively,
Hmm.
which is significantly higher than has ever been, right? So if you're going to retire, let's say, even at the retirement age that many people retire nowadays, which is about 65, you've still got over 20 years of life to live where the income that you need to live in that 20 years plus has to be passive. And so the question is, how do we actually do that? And that also comes at a time where the type of pensions available to us has changed. So historically, we used to have something called defined benefit schemes, as I mentioned earlier, also called final salary schemes, which essentially was a promise by the company that you worked for to look after you financially until you passed on, right? And so what that means is the way it worked is the company will be able to save and invest, and all the risk was on them to be able to save, invest, create some pool of assets to look after you in the future. The risk was all on them, and all you had to do was, work for them for a period of time, and you would have, received a pension.
Hmm.
And that no longer exists, or
The good old
to
days.
or to some extent, well, it does exist, but it really only really exists in the public field.
Mm.
So for civil servants, and even then, the way they are constructed is quite different, right? It's not as appealing and as exciting and as rewarding as it was before. So I think I read somewhere, I think it was like 95% of corporations no longer provide these DB schemes. And nowadays, most companies will provide something called a defined contribution scheme. And that DC scheme, also known as a money purchase scheme, is just another savings account. That's what a pension really is. It's just a savings account with tax benefits. But now the onus is on you to be proactive and intentional. Two words that we swear by on the Woke Finance podcast, being proactive and intentional with actually paying attention to how much is going into this contribution pot and how it's invested, because many people don't look under the bonnet of what we call a pension product. Pensions are just the accounts. There is something underneath these accounts called investments that you can take control over as well. So again, as I said, Peter, it depends how long you have. There are so many reasons why
Hmm.
people should be um taking retirement planning very seriously right now, even more so than ever. But the key thing is we don't want to get to a place where we are just enduring retirement, but we are actually enjoying retirement. And in order to do that, we need to be proactive and to start right now.
Hmm. I'm gonna throw in a simple or basic case study, Jax, and if you can just maybe or a statement or so, and you can let me know if it's true or not. So on the bit where you said obviously people are living longer. So let's say, I don't know, someone plans on retiring at 65, but they think or believe because of the fact that people are living longer, they're gonna live up to 95. So they might think, okay, I need to have a pension pot and save up to 300, you know what, £300,000. So that means basically I can split that every year and I'll get £30,000 every year, basically. Is that how a pension would work?
That's a great question. So, if you have 300 grand and you believe, yes, you're going to live for the next 30 years, so can you just take 30 grand out of this pot and live off it? I can understand why the average person may think that, but there are many different key considerations that we must consider. One of those key considerations, and I'm kind of picking this off head, this is not scripted or anything, But one of the key considerations would be where that money has been built up. If it has been built up in a standard pension pot, even though pensions are extremely tax efficient when you are saving initially, in the beginning end, at the end when you're trying to withdraw from it, there are tax implications. So you have to really, and this is why I say when you get to that stage, you do need to sit down with a regulated financial planner to plan how best to pull the assets, pull the income from your pension pot in the most tax efficient way. But there are tax implications. Very similarly, one of the ways I try to get people to understand how it works is see your pension pot as now your employer, and so they can provide you with a salary similarly to when you was working. You will still do PAYE, which means you will pay tax on that. Really, really important to understand that. The second one is the part that many, many people don't think about and don't understand, which is the impact of our dear friend inflation.
Hmm.
Inflation is essentially a measure of the price increase in the price of assets and goods in the economy, assets, goods, and services in the economy. So, in other words, things are always getting more expensive. The £30,000 that you would have hoped to withdraw in the first year of retirement will buy you significantly more than what you can buy in the 30th year, for example, right? In fact, it will be significantly different. I'm just going to do some mental maths here. If the inflation rate is about they call it about 3% over that period of time, then by the time you get to the 30th year, you would not be able to buy half the things that you're able to buy in the first year. So it's really important to understand that inflation is a real key consideration when it comes to retirement planning. And that's probably one of the challenges that most people face. And that's why most people do not, in order to answer your question, Peter, most people do not just have this savings pot that they just pull from. No, most people in retirement remain invested. They
Hmm.
remain invested because they need their asset base to still grow ahead of inflation. And ultimately, what most people will do is they will look for a safe withdrawal rate, which is a percentage that they can withdraw from that portfolio without depleting that portfolio too fast, but they still need to withdraw enough to supplement their lifestyle. Is what makes it difficult. This is why you need a sizable pot in order to have all these flexibilities. So I hope that answers your question. There's a few more considerations, but because of time, those are the two main ones that I would want people to understand.
And it does that because, and I specifically use that number £300,000 because, again, so that is a lot of money. But when we're thinking about retirement and how pensions and how it's used when it comes to actually using that money, it may not be as much as one may think. I'm not saying it's not a lot of money because it is, but again, it's just about understanding how one will use their pension pot.
Yeah.
So thank you for that, Jax.
Well, I just want to add just a bit more clarity on that, which
Mm.
is someone with a £300,000 pot. What most people say is the safe withdrawal pot on average is about 4%.
Mm.
So 4% of 300,000, I believe that's 12,000.
Hmm.
That's how much you can probably withdraw on a yearly basis, and still have enough money in the pot to last you a long period of time.
Love that.
Notice that 12,000 is exactly the same as the state pension that you mentioned earlier. So notice before I said you probably need a sizable pot just to even get close to what the state pension will
Mm.
provide you.
Hmm. I love that. I love that.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
go.
sorry, Peter. I was going to say, but hey, look, the key thing is here, if you have, worked for 35 year plus and you have been able to amass a portfolio of £300,000, which is a lot of money,
Mm.
then again, you can combine those two and that becomes 24 grand.
Yep.
Right? So that's pretty cool.
Yep.
Yeah, the only thing is with the state pension, you can't access it a bit earlier than you can with private pensions.
Hmm. Love that. Love that. Now, thank you for that and dispelling a few things that people might just think as well. So no, that's really good. Jax, I guess, I was gonna put in a another one, but it might come up a bit later, so that's fine. So I guess after hearing this, and we've honed in on just how serious it is for literally everyone, regardless of where you are right now in life, to start thinking about retirement planning. The obvious question is, okay, how can I, you know, start getting this in order and I start prioritizing this essentially? So, yeah, my question to you is, what can people actually do?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, if you are listening to the Woke Finance podcast, you have started doing something already, which is
Hmm.
getting knowledgeable and having a know-how, understanding what's going on, what are the challenges, what are the things that we should be considering. But in terms of proactivity, again, I'm going to go back to our key two words that we use on the Woke Finance podcast, which is intentionality and proactivity. So I want you to stay on top of this. I want you to stay on top of your contributions to your pensions. If you are someone who is employed, chances are, as long as you are 22 years old and earning over 10 grand, you will be automatically enrolled into your company pension scheme. So I want you to go and check who is your pension with. You can probably ask your human resource department for this information. I want you to get login details because there is a high chance that maybe your company has outsourced that to an insurance company. Here in the UK, we've got companies like Aviva, Legal& and General, Scottish Widows, Aegon, etc. So get login details, log in and check to see what's happening in your pension. How much money have you got in there? Also, even when you look inside, a lot of these companies will now make projections. I believe they are actually mandated to. So they will project, hey, look, if your portfolio grows by a specific amount, and they normally split into three, like cautious, balanced, or adventurous, depending on how much growth it is. This is how much you will have by the time you get to retirement, as long as you keep doing what you're doing. And then you can make a judgment call to say, am I doing okay? Am I not doing okay? Do I need to put more money in? Because there are opportunities to actually increase your contributions to try and get it to a safe amount, and so on and so forth. So that's what I want people to do first and foremost. I want you to definitely get access to your current pension pot. But guess what? Most people would have worked for multiple companies, so not just one company, right? And what I want you to do is I want you to find all the different pensions that you would have had throughout your working life. And I want you to consider, the keyword is consider, doesn't mean you have to, but I want you to consider consolidating your pension pot. Now that is something that requires a bigger conversation because it may not be in your best interest to always consolidate, but it is for most people a good idea. And one of the benefits of consolidation is it's easier to keep on top of things when
Mm.
there's only a couple accounts to have. That's number two. And then, like we said, I know this episode we've spoken a lot about pensions because pensions are probably the most obvious retirement products. But there are many different retirement products. Here in the UK, we've got ISAs. In America, you've got your Roth IRA, right? There are many different accounts that have different characteristics that are different from pension accounts that you can take advantage of. So, the example I gave was the ISA. Earlier, I spoke about, when you get to retirement age and you're trying to pull money outside of your pension pot. Often now you get 25% tax free, but the rest will be taxed. The key thing to remember is if you have used an ISA account, you've saved and invested using an ISA account here in the UK, for example, the characteristics is even though there's no tax relief going in, it does grow tax free and you can take the money out when you want with no tax, right? So
Mm.
you can combine ISAs with pensions, which is what most people do in retirement. They combine their ISAs and their pensions. And I don't want to get too sophisticated here, but I want to just add a piece of value here, which is earlier I said, using an example that we spoke by Peter, that you can, you combine your state pension, which was about 12 grand, and you can combine this 300k pot that you mentioned, which was about 12 grand, to make 24 grand. But then I made a comment and I said, well, actually, the state pension, you probably have to wait till 66, 67 to get it.
Mm.
Whereas with normal pensions, you can access that at 55, which is going up to 57 soon. So what do you do in that 10-year period? What can you use to bridge that gap
Mm.
between the private pension and the state pension? Well, that's where ISAs can come in,
Mm.
right? So it's really good to build an ISA pot as well as part of your retirement plan. Again,
Mm.
it's not just about pension pots. And then there are other things that I think are extremely important to do. And I hear sometimes, I don't know if you've heard this, Peter, but many, particularly American influencers, are talking about, hey, you don't need to get on a property ladder. You don't need to buy a house, all these things. But I submit to you that you probably do not want to be renting when you are retired.
Mm,
or you probably do not also want a mortgage when you are retired. So ideally, you want to have potentially owned a property, and by the time you get to retirement, you would have hoped to pay off the mortgage by then, because I was going to say that affords you the ability to decide to downsize if you want to
mm,
supplement your income if you don't have enough of your pensions and ISAs. But also, you get rid of the biggest liability on everybody's
mm.
budget, which is the mortgage or the rent.
And it means, I guess, let's say you do have £20,000 a year to live on, it makes that much more easier to live on.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. If you're living off 24 grand, but you don't have a mortgage or any rent, that's equivalent to someone who's on 40 grand or something.
Yep,
So,
yep, yep.
so really, really important to understand. This is why it's good to start early and start thinking about the best ways to, position yourself to be in the best place once you get to retirement.
Yeah, and just a side note on that bit where you might hear influencers etc. talking about you don't need to get on the property ladder and how it might be financially beneficial if you rent all your life and do this and do that. And this is just a personal opinion. It'll be good to hear from you out, particularly from people who have come from poorer backgrounds and yeah, I'll just say poorer backgrounds or so-called humble beginnings. I'll definitely say owning a property when we're thinking about generational wealth. I'm not just talking about now, generational wealth, which if you come from a poorer background, we've never been exposed to.
Hmm.
But if
Hmm.
you're thinking about setting things up for the next generations, next 50, 100, 200 years, property as an asset is going to play a key part in that. So I think,
Yeah.
where someone is coming from maybe a background where they've not grown up in some level of wealth, strongly consider if you are influenced by those things out there, that those people out there that say you don't need a property and
Yeah.
stuff.
Well, I think, look, when they made those comments, they're coming off from the fact that actually, in some parts of the world, it's more expensive to own than it is to rent. So there's
Mm,
that. Of course, when you buy a property, there is a huge capital outlay, usually in the form of a deposit, and also in the form of like refurbishments, renovations, etc. So that's kind of the argument that, a lot of money, sorry, a lot of money is going into the house. And so what they're saying is there is an opportunity cost to that, right? Which is why don't you take that money and maybe start a business or whatever, whatever. And I think I'm in a complete agreement with you in the sense that actually that school of thinking works for a very, very small percentage of people, where they can take the extra money that they didn't use to buy a house and, furbish it, etc., and to start a business. What they fail to say is that 80% of those people that try to do that fail their businesses.
mm,
So I get it, but I'm totally in agreement with you that actually for the average person, for someone who didn't grow up, for someone who's not expecting to receive a huge inheritance, that's another part they miss out. That some of these people are expected huge
mm,
inheritance. Which is why I like the fact that you mentioned generational wealth. Um, for most people that are going to be millionaires in the Western world, they get there 2 to 3 ways. It's very simple. They live by the principle of earning more than what they spend, right? It's one of the most number one principles in finance, earn more than what you spend. But then they use their difference to invest in assets, right? Which is using up pension pots and ISAs, for example, here in the UK, or 401ks and Roth IRAs in the US. And they are homeowners. But not only are just homeowners, they pay off the mortgage within a decent period of time, right? So usually between 20 years and 25 years. If they're able to build equity in their home whilst saving and investing in assets through tax efficient wrappers like ISAs and pensions, that's how the average person in the UK and the US and the Western world becomes a millionaire. And often it takes them up to their 50s to be able to do this. Okay. Most people don't get there, but the average millionaire, that's how they do it. So for most people that are first generation wealth builders, this is the best chance that you have at actually building wealth. And it's not something to be to just ignore.
mm.
Yeah.
Love it, love it. No, thank you for that, Jax. Final scenario statement slash on me, Jax. You mentioned, people need to get intentional. They've listened to this. They need to stay on top of their different pension pots. Let's say a 30-year-old right now has listened to this and they've heard this, then they go and check their pensions for the very first time, and they've noticed that for the last 10 years they've been paying on average £500 a month. That's including employers' contributions and their own money. And so they've been putting in about what is that, 12 grand a year, 6 grand a year, so to speak. And they've got about £60,000, etc. Yeah, let's just say that. And then
Mhm.
they're thinking, okay, it's taking me 10 years to get £60,000. That means when I'm 40, another 10 years, I'm gonna have 120, 120, and then after that, I'll have 180. So I'll probably retire on about 180. Why is that thinking perhaps flawed, and what encouragement could you give to maybe someone that is maybe in their 30s and check their pot, and maybe it's not as much as they thought it would be. Maybe it's like £30,000, £40,000. What encouragement can you give them when thinking about the next 20, 25 years of investing into your pension pot?
Yeah. If you were approaching retirement already, so if you were in your, I don't know, 50s, then this will be something that is quite challenging.
Hmm.
But if you were in your 20s and 30s and that's what you've come across and that's what you have, I would say that's actually a pretty high amount.
Hmm.
When we look at the statistics, you will find that the average person does not have, especially at that age, does not have £60,000. So actually, a £500 contribution is a fantastic amount of contribution towards your pension pot. But to actually answer your question, the key thing is to remember what pension pots are. They are just a home for your savings and investments. And so when you put that £500 in every single month, it doesn't just remain as cash. What it happens is it goes and it gets invested into assets. Why is that important to understand? And why does that help me answer your question? Because assets grow exponentially. They grow and they compound over time. Again, I'm going to use that keyword. Remember it. It's called compound interest. Compound interest, as Albert Einstein mentioned, is the eighth wonder of the world. Those who understand it earn it. Those who don't understand it pay for it, right? What I mean by this is the £60,000 that you've been able to amass has been a combination of how much money you've put in, number one. Number two, your portfolio performance. And number three, time. But the key thing is, as you continue this process, your portfolio, your pension pot starts to grow at an exponential rate. It doesn't grow linear. What that means is it doesn't just grow by the same amount every year. It gets bigger and bigger every single year. And the bigger it gets, the bigger it gets, the bigger it gets, the bigger it gets. So it grows exponentially. And at some point, you'll be shocked how um, the growth will be so exponential that in 1 year you can double your portfolio or in such a short space of time you can double your portfolio. The maths I would want to give, I'm trying to record this off by heart, but I want to give you some ideologies and best ways to think about this using some examples. Okay, so if someone wants to build a £1 million pot, and it starts with £10,000, okay, and that's how much they'll put in every single year. So even less than what you've described, okay. It will take them 7.5 years to get to their first 100K, right? And that's because they're earning a 10% return. I probably didn't mention that. They're investing 10 grand and they're earning a 10% return. It will take them 7.5 years to get to the first 100K. Okay.
Mm.
All right. But guess what? The next year to get to from 100K to 200K, it'll probably take about 4.5 years.
Mm.
And you're not doing anything different, right? You're just putting the same amount every single year, right? But it will take you less time to get your next 100K.
Mm.
To get from 200K to 300K, which is another 100K, it will probably take you 3.5 years,
Mm.
right? So what you notice is
Mm.
every time you add 100K, it's taking you less and less time, right? But I want to get you to the big kind of like hurrah moment, which is to get from 500K to 1 million, right? Which is 500K, an additional 500K, right? Once you get to 500K, it's going to take you the exact same amount of time to get from 500K to a million as it took you to get from 0 to 100K. Okay. And that's because of the power of compound interest.
Hmm.
It grows exponentially. So the key thing is just to keep with it, stick with it. And as long as you're able to put your small amounts of money in every single month, as long as you don't stop and your portfolio doesn't have any huge crashes and doesn't recover, for example, which we do have crashes, but they recover and they have always recovered, then all you've got to do is be consistent and give it enough time. And that's the key thing. That's why we are very, very keen on people starting young. So I hope that that example even brings things to light. And this person is even doing more than that. So that's fantastic.
Perfect. No, thank you very much for that, Jax, man. Super useful. Now, we've spoken about getting intentional, considering consolidating previous pension pots. Just to notice, Jax, you're not talking about your current workplace pension. You're talking about previous pension pots.
Yes,
Yep,
yes,
yep,
yes. So for most people, it probably is. I mean, you can,
mm,
but for most people, you can consolidate your previous pension pots into
yep,
one whilst keeping your current pension pot with the current employer,
yep.
so that you have two at any given goal. But for some people, it is actually possible to consolidate all your pensions into one, which will be your
Mm.
current employers as well.
Cool. We've spoken about obviously getting more money into pensions, spoken about the benefits of ISAs, and I like what you spoke about the gap between your accessing your private pensions and then the state pension and using ISAs to potentially fill in that gap. We've
Yeah.
spoken about the importance of getting on the property ladder because it's not just about, yeah, as I said, pensions and other, pots as well, but property as well. What else can someone be thinking about, Jax, right now in terms of
Yeah.
preparing for retirement?
Yeah, so the one thing which I think is huge and I haven't mentioned so far is I do believe that is important, especially nowadays, for people to try and build a business. It is common for people to build a business up to a certain point and then to sell that business for a lump sum of money as part of their pension or retirement planning. In fact, I'll submit to you that that's actually how a lot of self-employed businesses run. They will sell their business to someone else and they will have a pot of money, and that's the pot of money that they use in retirement. So I guess the one I'm trying to say with this one is even if you are someone who is employed, then that's fine and you can contribute towards your pension and benefit from your employer contributions, yes, but you can also have your own business on the side as well, for which you can build and build and build, and you don't know how big it can get. And what happens is, yes, you get to a certain point where you can actually sell the business. We call that a capital event, where you're able to change that business into a liquid amount of cash, and that could be used to serve you in retirement. Now, that's a capital event. I would even submit to you and say and go further to say maybe you don't want to sell the business. Maybe you still have built a pension pot with your employer, but you've had this side hustle for many years and you enjoy it. And that's something that you want to continue doing in retirement, or you want to do other um, businesses or some side hustles. That's what I'm looking for. That's fantastic as well. This can additionally supplement your income during retirement as well. So what I'm trying to say is, yeah, there's a case for just building businesses and even if it's not a corporate business or a limited business, it could be a side hustle. You can even use that as some a way to generate additional income to save into your ISA or pensions as well. Yeah, really good.
Mm. Love it, love it, love it, love it. Okay, fantastic. So building a bit, and I think as you mentioned something which is just so exciting. Just never with a business, you just never know how big it could get over time, and really investing into it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, super exciting as well. Okay, Jax. Anything else? I guess in terms of what people can do today.
Yeah, I think the key thing for me is starting with the understanding that this is something that is a problem. It's something that, we've mentioned it in previous podcasts where we talked about the pension or the retirement crisis. And we've brought it back again because it's getting even more difficult. And I think people should be very intentional. But what I really want to get across, especially to our younger listeners, is if you start early, you position yourself in a very, very strong position to be able to retire. The key phrase that I said is we don't want to get to retirement and just have to endure it and survive. We want to enjoy retirement, having worked our socks off for many, many decades. These are really important, but I think the key thing is to think about the mechanical things you can do as well, which we've mentioned. We've talked about staying on top of your pensions, making sure you get as much money into your pensions, ISAs, getting on a property ladder. All these things are fantastic things to do to position yourself in order to have a comfortable retirement. But I think the last thing I want to say is retirement planning is not just about pensions. And I know I've spoken a lot about pensions today, but it's not just about pensions. I think it's about asking yourself the ultimate question, which is how am I going to live when I cannot live off income that requires me to work? In other words, for many people, retirement is really actually about financial independence. Are you able to generate income from your assets in order to supplement your lifestyle? Ultimately, that's when you can decide to retire and retire comfortably. And the way to do that is to build an asset base. An asset base is a combination of a well-diversified portfolio of assets that can generate an income to basically help you live. It is Warren Buffett that said that ultimately, if you don't find a way to earn money in your sleep, you would work forever, basically. So it's really, really important to understand that. And the last thing I want to put out there that I've mentioned already is it's not just about income as well, it's about your liabilities. You want to find a way to remove as many liabilities as possible in retirement. And one of the biggest liabilities for most people is their rent or their mortgage. So remember that as well, that actually, if you do have a mortgage already, think about when you're going to pay that off. The sooner the better. And if you're not yet on a property ladder, think about the benefits of getting on a property ladder and what it can do for you.
Wow, thank you very much for that, Jax. Now, in our episodes, Jax, on our descriptions, we usually put a disclaimer. We do not give out financial advice, but rather education and our own opinions. Please do your own due diligence and seek professional advice before making any personal finance decisions. Now, Jax, we know as listeners, people listening, this can just kind of go over people's heads. We know
Yeah,
it, we've done it before, but how important is this? um bit of disclaimer
yeah.
for listeners at some point in their retirement planning.
Because it's not just a disclaimer, it's true. It's one of those things that ultimately everybody's circumstance is so unique. Notice even earlier I was talking about different things and I stuck in there that, hey, but there are some people that are, awaiting a large inheritance. So that person's very unique circumstance could be very different from yours, which can change things. So ultimately, it's always important to understand that context and nuance is very, very, very important to consider. Um, and what I will tell people is for a lot of people, especially as you approach retirement, I would even encourage you to do that now, if I'm honest with you, is to seek professional help. There are financial planners out there that are regulated, that are regulated and basically have to do a job by you, that you can book and speak to that can actually, at least in the early stages, in your accumulation stage, help you to have a structure in place that will help you to, move towards your aspired goals. Because ultimately, it's not everybody that's very much interested in investing. It's not everybody that has the time, the energy, the temperament, sorry, to be able to actually follow what's happening in the stock market, what's happening in their portfolios, etc. These are where financial planners and financial advisors, wealth managers come into play. That's why a lot of wealthy families use them. I would say in the early stages, you don't have to, but it's good to. But particularly if you are towards the latter stages of your journey, if you are maybe 10 years away from retirement, then most definitely I would encourage you to do that. And guess who is going to be that person now? A financial planner. Me, Jax Opoku. Yes, for those listening, even though I have spent 10 years, 11 years in investment management and asset management, I have now decided to widen my capabilities, widen my offering to be able to provide regulated financial planning for the everyday person and everyday family. And so that's something that I can do for you as well as education. Much more about the education, but if you need someone to do it for you, here I am.
Nice little plug there. Now, but thank you very much for that, Jats, man. Super, super, super useful. Hopefully for our listeners as well. Extremely useful. And I think this is one of those episodes where we don't want it to just go over your heads. We encourage you to replay this, and if I'm honest, send it to other people, man. It's so important that we stay on top of this and start prioritizing this if it wasn't a priority already. Retirement might feel like a long way for a lot of people, but it can come around just like that, and we all want to be ready. So let's stay proactive, let's stay intentional, man. So Jax, thank you very much for that. Any final things before I let you go, man?
Yeah, I think we've covered it all today. Look, this conversation is a much, much bigger conversation. It's a broad conversation. It's an ongoing conversation. We will have another episode talking about it again and again and again because it is a real problem. Look, many people, may not take their personal finance journey seriously. They've heard about investing, they've heard about all these things, but they turn a blind eye. And the truth of the matter is, you can kick the can down the road, but you can only kick it down so far, right? People can look like they're living well, have expensive cars and go on 1,000 holidays a year, and they can follow the Joneses for a very long time. But the key thing is, it catches up to you at some point. And the thing that really catches people out is when they finally get to that stage in their life when they are approaching retirement and they realize that actually they have absolutely no means of sustaining and enjoying a comfortable retirement. That's
And
when it really hits a lot of people. So we want you guys, I know it's not very easy for a lot of people to see 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the line, but it's coming. And it's important to understand that.
hmm. And I know we can talk on so many things, but so when we do touch on it again, we can touch on the other side of things because enjoying your money doesn't just mean having money, but actually having a body that is able to enjoy that money in terms of an able body and a mobile body.
Yeah.
And the things we do now in our teens, in our 20s, 30s, 40s, will show up when we get to that age.
That is a retirement plan, right? As I
Hmm.
said, we don't want to go up. We don't want to just endure our retirement. We want to enjoy our retirement. And we can't enjoy our retirement if we can't even walk.
Hmm. Listen.
So very, very important to understand that too.
Whew. Yeah, man. Love it, love it, love it, man. Well, the conversation will go on for our listeners. Keep the conversation going. Share it, like it, subscribe, comment, and all of that good stuff. And remember all,
Stay
stay woke.
woke.